Good afternoon. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and I am so pleased to introduce one of my favorite webinars of the year. It's our Ohio Spring Roundabouts Update, and our primary presenter today is Hillary Isebrands, who is a longtime friend of Ohio in the topic of roundabouts. She's an engineer with the Federal Highway Administration, and we are so pleased that she was able to find time on her very busy schedule to give us this update. Hillary has invited some co-presenters, and I will let her introduce them as she brings them on during the presentation. So you'll get some surprise guest appearances on today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items, then we'll get things moving. First off, I would ask that you look on your GoToWebinar panel and find the questions box. In that box, I would like for you to drop me a hi or hello, because this is how we're going to accept questions from you, during the webinar. I see lots of hi, hello, howdies coming in, so that's good. I'm glad you found it. The second thing is I wanted to make sure you knew that in the GoToWebinar panel, we also have a handout section. And in there, we have a copy of today's presentation from Hillary, and I will send that out in an email after the webinar completes as well. So if you can't download it for some reason, please don't worry. You'll get a copy in your email later on, along with hopefully a recording to this webinar. We are attempting to record it. I also threw in there for good measure in the handout section some flyers for other upcoming webinars that we have scheduled that you might be interested in. I know that everybody still needs to keep up on their training, and that CPD credits are necessary for license renewals. So we've got some coming up on self-evaluations and transition plans and a pro-ag overview. We also have a one on ADA and temporary traffic control. It's going to be done by Ron Eck from the West Virginia LTAP Center. Does a great job on that. And we've got a gravel roads webinar coming up that's going to be done by Bruce Drews, who used to be the director of the Idaho LTAP Center. So in addition, we also have one on the ins and outs of the OH1, which is Ohio's crash reporting form. So if you've ever wanted to know everything you could possibly data mine for crash analysis in Ohio, this is your webinar. So that's it for my LTAP commercial. And I see lots of highs and hellos, so people found the question box. Hillary, I think it's time for me to turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all. And I am going to attempt to actually share my webcam for just a moment as we kick things off. So hi, everyone. I'm happy to see you. I just thought it would be nice with this environment that we're in that you get to see my face as we do this webinar, as we kick it off. So I'm not going to keep myself on screen as we go through the webinar today, but I may jump on every once in a while once we get to maybe some in-depth questions. We do have some questions for you and some poll questions that we're going to be featuring today, as well as a couple of guest speakers that I have asked to join us to talk a little bit about some things that are going on in Ohio. I was so hoping that in May I would have seen many of your faces in person at the TRB International Roundabouts Conference in Monterey, California. Unfortunately, as many things, we're not able to be face-to-face, but I think this is an amazing alternative, and a lot of kudos to you, Ohio LTAP and Victoria, for your staff, for all the things that you have been doing virtually to make sure that we continue to get education, and we are able to collaborate and work together on all that we do to help save lives of folks in Ohio and across the country as it relates to traffic and pedestrians. So I'm excited to be with you today. So I'm going to turn my webcam off, but I'll probably join you a little bit later. And again, please, if you've got questions, please start populating the question pod. We also have the chat pod if you've got any issues. Victoria is there to help us along as we go through. So there should be plenty of time today for not only what I have prepared for you, but also any of the questions that might come up that may not be necessarily things that I'm going to cover in some of the slides that you will see. So sit back, enjoy, and I hope that you are engaged for the next 90 minutes. Thank you. All right, so let's focus on making sure. I hope everyone can see the slide deck there. You will notice we've got Newark. Many of us were there in September of 2019 for the wonderful Ohio Roundabout Conference. And again, can't say enough about what you all do in Ohio to share the knowledge, share lessons learned, share the struggles as well as the successes as it relates to roundabouts. To be honest, I learned from you as much as hopefully you learned from me when it comes to roundabouts, and whether it be design or education or traffic capacity, unique features, or even just the typical features that we see at roundabouts. So let's get going with the slide deck here, and we'll just move on. All right, so this is not an official poll because it's going to be a question to you all. So I want you guys to populate that question pod that Victoria asked you to find as she did her introductions. I want to know if anyone has any fun roundabout stories from the last few months. Clearly our lives have changed in the last few months, and I'm just curious if anyone has anything that they want to share, something that you did that you hadn't done before, or maybe a roundabout you hadn't seen before. I know that one of the things that my kids and I have been doing is we're trying to get outside as much as possible, especially now that the weather has turned. And there's a pathway that we walk on regularly. We ride bikes and that we walk on regularly near our home. And at every junction in the path, and you've got a photo there that you can see, my kids made me a roundabout at every single junction in the path. So that was kind of my fun story. They always say, "Mom, did you go through the roundabout today?" So there's actually 3 roundabouts that they put on the path that I walk on, because I'm not driving much clearly right now. And that was one fun way that they did something for me in the last couple of months. So I'm going to look into the question pod to see if anyone has anything to share. And Victoria, if you want to help me with this as well, we can.
Sure. I can read some off to you.
Please do.
Goff said that she was in Australia and the roundabouts are the norm there, and she loved it. It was unusual going around the opposite direction though. So, and then Richard Schulte experienced a roundabout in Scotland. Traffic is on the opposite side of the road. Yikes. Someone else had someone just stop in the roundabout, which probably, unfortunately, isn't the exception. It's probably the norm sometimes. It says another person told some non-transportation colleagues about a non-circular roundabout, which really confused them. And Christopher, he's got his 4-year-old who likes to draw roundabouts in his sidewalk chalk roads. Okay. Matt Carter from Delaware misses the roundabouts because he's been off the roads mostly. Joe said he's on a roundabout in the Bahamas, which had seashells for the truck apron. And I'll add to the funny stories. My 18-year-old son has decided that he's going to drive in circles at least twice when he takes me through a roundabout now, because he thinks it's funny. So someone else, Tom, said that they were in Iceland a few years ago and they are very rural and have lots of roundabouts. And Thomas said that their funny story is showing their son the magic roundabout in the UK, and that the 18-year-old son, he thought it was crazy. So that's what we have for right now, Hillary.
That's great. Well, I just thought it would be a fun way to kind of kick things off as we get started here, to hear some of the fun ways that we're still thinking about roundabouts, even though we might not be driving them as often. And really, I'm going to actually touch on this a little bit more in terms of that. We'll talk about not over-designing roundabouts and really thinking about those traffic volumes and making sure that we think about off-peak periods And clearly this time that we're in now is completely different, but you can see how a roundabout might be more efficient when there's those lesser traffic volumes than some of our other intersection control types. So again, thank you guys so much for playing along with my fun roundabout stories from the last few months. So getting started, I want to talk a little bit about saving lives on all roadways and the importance of saving lives on all roadways, whether it's a state highway, it's an interstate off-ramp, it's a county road, it's a township road, it's a city road, all the different ways. And then thinking about all of our users, all the way from oversized vehicles, freight, to everyday cars and trucks, bicyclists, motorcyclists, pedestrians of all abilities, and really thinking about how our projects can make sure that everyone is able to drive safely. We'll talk about roundabout guidance and keeping up with the roundabout guidance that we have both at the local level, the state level, and then of course the national level. I'm going to cover a few hot topics. That's something that I usually try to do, where I oftentimes have called that trending topics that we have covered in the past, and you'll see some of those topics covered in a little more detail here today. And then clearly the education component that is always ongoing, and we should always have that continuous improvement as how we communicate not only about roundabout projects, but projects in general to help save people's lives. And although we will have interaction throughout the webinar, I also have allowed for some time at the end that if there's additional questions that come in, that Victoria can help me field those questions at the very end. So, and just so you guys know, if you're not, if you don't know me, if this is the first time you've seen and heard from me, I take every opportunity that I can to find a new roundabout or catch a picture or a video of a roundabout from a different perspective. This just happens to be, I was flying home from TRB in January, and I happened to be flying over a roundabout corridor. So I couldn't have been more excited, clearly, about that in January, and was able to get some nice video that I was able to then do some screenshots from to have a different perspective of a roundabout corridor. So again, trying to always learn from different projects across the country and really around the world in terms of whether it's a new project or an updated project or just a project that is noteworthy in terms of what is going on. All right, so really when we talk about saving lives on all roadways, it is important to know the data. It is important to make sure that we are aware of what is going on around us, not only in maybe our community, but where we're practicing. For consultants, that may be all across the state of Ohio and across the country. For those of you that might work for local agencies or the Ohio DOT, it becomes important to really understand the crash data. And clearly we're talking about roundabouts, so we're talking about intersections, but Ohio DOT has an amazing, basically dashboard of the crash data, and I was able to get in and dig a little bit in preparing for this webinar today. But really, it's taking a look at what's the pulse of intersection safety in your state, in your community, and how can I make sure react to that, but also be proactive. And that's always an important piece of what we do, is to combine those two, react to what is going on out there on the roadways, but also be proactive and looking for opportunities to deploy proven safety countermeasures whenever we can. And we know roundabouts are a proven safety countermeasure. So I encourage you to dig deep, not only in the state, but at the district level as well as the local level, to really, again, kind of test the pulse of where intersection safety is in the areas that you are working in. Make sure you're understanding the issues and looking for those opportunities to basically deploy roundabouts. This is a little bit more specific to looking at pedestrians at intersections. Again, utilizing I believe this is Power BI that they are using to share the data, share the crash data, So in this case, we're looking at fatal crashes, we're looking at serious injury crashes, we're looking at minor injury and PDO crashes that are occurring. You can see the different types of intersections. Clearly, you can see there the traffic circle, the roundabout, as well as all-way stops, traffic signals, and so on and so forth. So a great way to visualize what is going on in your state, and in this case, as it relates to pedestrian safety and intersections, and what are we doing to improve that? Again, hopefully looking at proven safety countermeasures and deploying them not only as safety projects, but also deploying them as capital improvement projects, as state-funded projects, as locally funded projects. So I encourage you, and I think I heard Victoria talk about some opportunities up and coming related to the crash form and the importance of the information that is on crash forms and how that helps us then make better data-driven decisions about intersections in our roadways overall. So again, this is something that it's a new way of looking at the data, at least for me in Ohio. And again, you guys are always ahead of the curve. And so I always like to see how Ohio is presenting the data and how you can use this information as you are looking at both individual projects as well as planning for the future in your communities. So I almost always just kind of have a few items that I like to cover that really are facts about roundabouts. And it doesn't hurt to see them for the first time, for the 10th time, or for the 100th time, because it really is motivation for why we look to roundabouts as that solution. So I'm going to go through those. Top 5 here is looking at well-designed roundabouts save lives. We know that. The data tells us that in the US, the data tells us that around the world, the data tells us that in our communities. So we know that this is an opportunity to improve safety in our communities, reduce fatal crashes, as well as reducing severe injury crashes. Speeds between 15 and 25 miles per hour keep all users safe. Again, that's kind of that sweet spot. It is a range. Sometimes we see lower than 15, sometimes we see higher than 25. But the importance of what that means, what that speed means for all users is really, really important. One of the things, and you may have heard me say this before, that I always do when I'm driving through a roundabout, whether it's the roundabout in my own community or it's a roundabout I've driven for the first time, is I always like to check my speeds. I always like to see whether it's I'm an R1, an R2, or R3, or R4, or R5. So that's our speeds that we're checking as we're doing our designs. That's the entry speed, the entering speed, the circulating speed, the right turn speed, the left turn speed. Those are ones that are really important. And I always smile when I'm between that 15 and 25 miles per hour. So again, you can be doing this even on your commutes safely, of course, checking your speeds as you're navigating through these roundabouts to really see if it is in that sweet spot of speed.
Hillary, I have a quick
one
question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody would like to know if you could just briefly explain the difference between a roundabout and a traffic circle.
Sure thing. So, and maybe that came from that previous slide. So traffic circles tend to be larger. And when I say the word large, typically that means anywhere between 300 feet in diameter upwards of 600 or 700 feet in diameter. So it can be very, very large. Traffic circles also don't always have yield on entry. Roundabouts always have yield on entry. So if you think of like a DuPont circle in the Washington, D.C. area, there's actually traffic signals at many of the approaches to those large traffic circles. And sometimes there's parks in the middle of traffic circles. Again, not a feature of a modern roundabout. Traffic circles also sometimes have larger speeds and weaving areas. Again, that's not a feature of a modern roundabout. And I know in Ohio, you guys have some larger traffic circles that are, I want to say lower volume, but they tend to be very, very large, and sometimes there's stop control on entry versus the yield control. So that is the difference, and that's why probably in that data that I just showed, you see both traffic circle and roundabout, because they are categorizing those together in this particular database. And really, a roundabout is a type of traffic circle, but when I think of the large rotary or a traffic circle overall, they tend to be larger, and that's kind of differentiating between them. And so a roundabout is a type of circular intersection, but there are several types of circular intersections. There's also what we call traffic calming circles, which tend to be kind of in our neighborhood. And I wish I had usually I have a side-by-side, or I do have a side-by-side comparison of the two. But that's one way of differentiating between a larger traffic circle that I know you have in Ohio, a smaller traffic calming circle, and then a modern roundabout. So hopefully that's helpful. So getting back to the list, we've got, again, pedestrians crossing one direction of travel at a time, which reduces conflicts, and it reduces really the number of decisions that pedestrians are making. Single lane roundabouts only have 8 vehicle-vehicle conflict points. So again, a significant reduction compared to the 32 vehicle-vehicle conflict points that we might see at a traditional intersection. And then of course, hitting the fact that right sizing for context, for users, and for off-peak traffic can avoid over design. And I know we're going to hear about that a couple more times, not only from myself, but one of our guest speakers today, in terms of right sizing our project for what we have in terms of how it will be used and the users that we have out there, as well as the traffic today and the traffic 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So these are really important pieces that we have to be able to speak to as we are communicating why we might have a roundabout as a preferred alternative at our intersections. So let's dive into roundabout guidance, okay? So hopefully you are all familiar with our NCHRP 672, which is getting outdated. Publication date was in 2010, and here we are 10 years later. But hopefully you know that there has been dozens and dozens of other research projects, as well as updates to other documents that we're using in both traffic and design that are enhancing really what is in NCHRP 672. I still refer to this document on a regular basis. Many of you might also be aware of a project that is going on right now. So I've borrowed a slide from a presentation at TRB in January regarding NCHRP, so that's National Cooperative Highway Research Program Project 03-130, which is the guide for roundabouts. And essentially what that will do will replace NCHRP 672. They are in the process of moving on to phase 2 of this particular project, where they are going to be focusing on the development of the guide itself and integrating all of that research that's already out there that's been completed, as well as actually conducting some additional new research on a few topics that will advance the practice even further as it comes to roundabouts. So you can see there that the anticipated completion would be in 2022, but we all know how that can go with projects sometimes. So the NCHRP panel, as well as the consultants and TRB staff or NCHRP staff continue to advance this project. Looking more closer to home for you all, I love the fact that Ohio DOT does usually at least they've got your January update and a July update that you guys do for your design guide. And you did have some new updates in January of 2020. Hopefully you all are familiar with those. Typically those are presented in red text to show the difference between what was in the previous version and what is in the current version that you have. So some of the things that I am going to highlight that I really appreciate that are included in your ODOT roundabout guidance. Clearly, the NCHRP 672 is the foundation for the guidance. But there is some emphasis in particular areas that I think is really important as you all are advancing roundabouts in the state of Ohio. The language that is used is really good. Looking at the design, and when I say design, I mean not only the geometry, but also the traffic engineering, the traffic volumes that go into it. It calls out, and it really is asking designers to look for those trade-offs for all users, because we do know that we have a wide spectrum of users. We have a wide spectrum of traffic volume that are using our facilities, our roadways, and it's really asking the designer to be cognizant of that and take that into consideration as they're making decisions about the project, whether that be size or whether that be the number of lanes or what that pedestrian crossing might look like. It really does encourage the designer to be thinking about those trade-offs as they go through the iterative design process. Your ODOT guidelines for roundabouts also talks about the future conditions, and it really asks to think about the potential for phased implementation. And that phased implementation also is clearly driven by, it can be driven by land use, it can be driven by traffic volume. Looking at today versus, again, that 10-year, 15, 20-year horizon, and making sure that we're not over-designing that project right off the bat. So again, giving the designer permission to be thinking about that, to be documenting that as a part of their process for getting to that ultimate design. The ODOT guidance also presents a value ranges for the inscribed center diameter. So that's the diameter of the roundabout. And I love the fact that this has been an update that has come in the last, let's see, I'd say 12 to 18 months, where you've got that range of values. So as a designer, you are able to and have that freedom based on your perhaps right-of-way constraints or the context. You are able to use that range to optimize your design. There is some good language in there regarding the splitter island lengths, whether you are in an urban environment or you are in a rural environment, whether you are in a lower speed environment or a higher speed environment. I'm going to call out that specific section, that's 403.6.9 splitter islands. Again, talking about what ODOT would prefer to see related to those splitter island lengths. On higher speed roadways, the island length should be 150 to 200 feet. Of course, every project has its own variables, has its own potential constraints that we're going to have to work around. But I really like the detail that is included in the Ohio DOT roundabout guidance. There's information about that truck apron and that curbing between the circulatory roadway and that truck apron. So looking to a 2 to 3 inch reveal. Again, some of our older designs have a more vertical, robust, high curb design. And so we're really looking to manage that, and your guidance really is pointing you to that in terms of managing what that interface between the circulatory roadway and the truck apron looks like. That can be important for transit buses. That can be important for someone hauling a trailer of horses. That can be important for someone, a tanker truck that has liquid that can move from side to side in the trailer. There's a lot of reasons why we want to be very specific about how we look at that truck apron detail and that curbing. The other thing that was an addition last year was this nice checklist, and really a checklist to help not only a reviewer, but also really to help, I think in my opinion, the designer in terms of some of the key things that we want to be looking at and make sure you've accounted for in your design. You can see there, it talks about just basic geometry. It talks about the phi angle, the radii that you have on your fastest path, other details regarding the crosswalk, design vehicles, your truck apron width. We've seen that evolution of the truck apron width. Before, sometimes in multi-lane, we didn't even see them. And now we're saying, yes, truck aprons for all roundabouts. We've seen some real benefits in what that can look like. If you're in a northern climate where you've got plowing, having that little bit wider truck apron can really be helpful for maintenance operations, as well as maintenance for not only plowing, but also general maintenance. So again, I really like the continuous improvement and that I see in the ODOT guidance. This is one of the states where I regularly check what you all have in the guidance as I am working with people not only in Ohio, but across the country. I pulled this one out just because, again, this is just an example of a major change that occurred in the roundabout section related to the spirals. You can see there the image on the right, as well as the text that we have there. I don't intend to go into great detail, but this was a major update that occurred in January 2020 of your roundabout guidance. So if you haven't grabbed the most recent document, I encourage you to do so. As always, I like to make sure that I am aware of what other states are doing across the country, what all states are doing across the country as it comes to their guidance. So, for example, Wisconsin, for those of you who know me well, know that I actually grew up in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has always long-standing had very detailed guidance on roundabouts. They also continually update. You can see they had an August 15 update, as well as on the right there, you've got Washington State. They actually had an update in September of 2019. It's always good to be looking at it. This stuff is much more accessible to us these days. Perhaps there's something that you're curious about or you're not quite sure how to design or handle there in Ohio. We do have, in addition to NCHRP 672, we do have other states and local agencies that have some great information out there that we can be tracking and is very easily accessible. You guys are able to download a copy of this PDF for your use. I always try, and if I don't, I must have missed it, but I always try to put the links of where I'm getting my information so you guys can go directly back to that and you can dig in for yourselves. And in this case, you've got not only design guidance, it also has the operational steps and recommendations for these particular states. A new study that has come out by Federal Highway Administration through our Office of Safety, Jeff Shaw, that some of you may know, led the effort for a turbo roundabout informational primer. So this is a document that is fairly new, but what it does is it's looking at more or less it's international experience, because that's really where the international experience is when it comes to turbo roundabouts. You can see there the image on the right and how the turbo roundabout from the geometric feature looks different than our traditional modern roundabout. But this is a document, again, the link there is on the bottom. I encourage you to take a look at that and familiarize yourself with it. Now, I know that Arcadis there in Ohio, Brian Moore in particular, he was involved in this project and has been involved in looking at some feasibility studies there in Ohio for particular projects. To our knowledge, in the US, the first turbo roundabout that will be on the ground, and I haven't confirmed 100% or not if it is on the ground yet, it would be in Jacksonville, Florida. They had a roundabout that has been vetted for quite some time now. It was supposed to start construction at the end of 2019. I was unable to confirm that prior to our webinar today. So if any of you can confirm that that is completed, I would love to hear in the chat pod. But again, this is just another variation of the roundabout. It has some different benefits in terms of lower speeds and really trying to reduce some of the issues that we tend to see on multi-lane roundabouts with raised features, raised channelization on the approaches and raised channelization within the circulatory roadway. So stay tuned on this. This has been talked about at your Ohio Roundabout Conference, or the concept of a turbo roundabout, as well as, again, now we have an informational primer here in the United States to help those that might be looking deeper into this option for design. All right. So another update, I spoke about this actually in September when I was there last year. The 2019 MiniRoundabout Symposium that was hosted by really the Michigan LTAP and Michigan Tech University, as well as Washington Road Commission. Mark McCullough, who some of you might know, he did attend actually your Ohio Roundabout Conference last year. Had a real nice session there talking specifically about mini roundabouts. So the image on the left is from Washtenaw County, Michigan, and the image on the right is actually a photo of a mini roundabout in Georgia that I had a visit with Georgia DOT. And what I want you guys to know there is on that link, you can actually get access to the presentations. You can't hyperlink from the PDF, but the link on the bottom there, you can actually get access to those presentations. Great information. We've got a lot of mini roundabouts that are coming on board, that are being deployed and constructed at a much faster pace than they have been really over the last 10 years. So it's good to see us really right-sizing our intersection designs and finding opportunities for the mini roundabouts in our network. So I do have a poll question here, and Victoria, I'm going to attempt to pull this one up.
Okay, that or I can pull it up for you. It's up to you.
All right.
All right.
So what roundabout projects are you mostly working on? Single lane, hybrid designs, multi-lane, mini roundabouts, a mix of all of them, or none? So just again, looking for what you're primarily working on for those of you, and this could be from an agency perspective, or this could be from a designer perspective. Okay, so right now, a majority of you are working on single lane roundabouts, which is great. Single lanes, you can are very common no matter where you are, whether it's a very rural environment, suburban environment, an urban environment. So great to see. So about 14% of you are saying hybrid design, so that would be a combination of 1 and 2 lanes or 2 and 3 lanes. Not many working on multi-lane roundabouts, 2x2s. A few of you working on minis. Again, you've got some great examples actually in the state of Ohio of mini roundabouts. We saw those there in Newark last fall at the Roundabout Conference. And then of course, there's a significant number of you that are working on a combination of those, which I would expect for those either agencies or consultants that are working on multiple projects. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. It is really helpful to see what is going on and kind of get that pulse of what all you guys are working on. So I'm going to close that poll and we'll just keep moving on. All right, I'm actually going to pause there and just see, Victoria, are there any questions that you can help me with there in the chat pod that we should address
Sure.
now?
Well, how about if I just start reading them off and then you let me know when to stop?
Okay, sounds good.
We'll start with the first one. It says, someone's looking for options to move bicyclists through roundabouts versus taking them to the sidewalk prior to the roundabout. What suggestions do you have?
Well, part of that question might be context. You know, a bicyclist always would have an option to ride through the roundabout with vehicular traffic. And sometimes it depends on, you know, what kind of infrastructure or cross section is in advance of the roundabout. Is it a rural cross section where you have a shoulder? Is it a bike lane of sorts in maybe a suburban or an urban environment? Is there other infrastructure for pedestrians and bicyclists, maybe that it's parallel to the roadway? I think always having the option is kind of the best way to go. Again, it depends on the comfort level of that rider. If you are near, say, an elementary school, you might encourage those students that are riding their bikes maybe to use the bike ramp and then use the shared use facilities, which would act more like a sidewalk or a shared use path to navigate through the intersection. It also would depend on, what kind of speeds or posted speeds and driving speeds you have leading up to that. So I always like to have options. Again, a lot of it has to do with the comfort level of the riders themselves and what kind of context you are in. There's good information really that starts with NCHRP 672, but a lot of good examples out there we're seeing across the country of even using the bike lanes, the green painted bike lanes, and what that might look like in a kind of a mixed situation for PEDS bikes as well as vehicles. There's also an example in Florida, and it's actually in the Massachusetts guidance, the Complete Streets guidance, that shows actually even separating PEDS and bicycles in the crosswalk areas. So there is some good information out there, but I usually say it really depends on what you've got going on at the particular location. I love to have the options, but it ultimately does depend on the context as well as what kind of riders you might expect in that area. Thanks, Victoria.
Sure. Do you have time for one more?
Yes, we'll take one more.
There's a comment, and it kind of came in through 4 different parts, but I'll summarize it. Someone said they've seen discussions of various state laws and whether it's safer to use turn signals upon entering or exiting roundabouts, and they would like to know why turn signals aren't being required. That some people feel that it would seem like it would be safer if they were doing that.
Sure. And so first I'm going to ask a question back, Victoria. Do you have an update on the Ohio driver's handbook related to roundabouts by chance for us?
No, I don't have an update for you. I apologize.
Okay. That's okay. I hit you cold on that one, but I know Ohio is working on getting some good information about roundabouts in the driver's manual handbook. So it's consistent not only for users, but it's consistent for driver's education and for all of us to be seeing, again, that consistent message. And the person who's asking that question is absolutely correct. When you look across the country and you look at the driver's handbooks, manuals across the country, it is different in terms of what you see. Some have stronger language related to turn signals. Some don't mention turn signals at all. And I think that that's something that should be discussed discussed for sure at the state level. It has not been elevated, I believe, at the national level, at least to my awareness, through TRB or ITE. I'll tell you what, as a roundabout specialist, as well as a driver out there are times where I do use my signal, and more or less I'm using that signal when I'm exiting, particularly on a right turn, and I see someone queued up on the next approach, waiting to see what I'm going to do before they actually take a gap or decide to actually yield, depending if I'm going through or left or turning right. So I will use that right turn signal as I exit, go from an approach to the right. Now, I don't necessarily use it if I'm on a through movement or on a left turn. I'm actually usually just using that to hopefully as a courtesy to another driver that might be looking to me to see what I'm doing, so then they can make a decision. It is not uniform. Some people struggle with, well, does that mean I can change lanes in the roundabout if I can use my signal? And so we get into that, which we will have to save that conversation for a time where we have more time to discuss and debate what that might mean. But I would be curious. I have not seen the draft language or the final language in Ohio. I know that has been something that folks have been working on.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll hold the rest of the questions. And I'm gonna keep on moving it, but we will definitely have time. There'll be a couple more breaks in here as well as time at the end. All right, so let's talk about some hot topics. And I'm going to start out with a pooled fund project, and maybe not all of you are familiar with the Transportation Pooled Fund Program, but what it is it's a program that multiple entities can contribute funds to on a specific problem statement or a specific research project or a specific issue that many parties are interested in. So there is great interest in drivers failing to yield at multi-lane roundabouts. And some of the issues that we've seen nationally as well as locally, and you will see there that the city of Hilliard is a part of that pooled fund project. We also have Connecticut DOT, Florida DOT, Georgia DOT, New York State DOT, Washington DOT, and Wisconsin DOT, as well as Federal Highway Administration that are a part of this pooled fund project. And Federal Highways is the lead agency. We do have a contractor on board that includes VTTI as well as Kittleson and Associates that are working with us on this project. We actually had a panel meeting in March. It actually was supposed to be face-to-face. We ended up doing it virtually. That worked well. We were able to get a lot of accomplished. But I just want to share with you some of the details of that, and this allows me also to queue up Letty Champ from the city of Hilliard. She's going to be talking in just a moment a little bit about what she has going on there in the city of Hilliard. But again, she is a member of this group, of this pooled fund program, as she contributes ideas as well as reviewing documents and information that will come out of this project. So let me share with you the tasks that are included in this project. Again, Federal Highways is the lead. Wei Zhang from our research and development group, R&D, our Turner Fairbank is our lead for this. But really where we're at is the field investigation and looking at some analysis. So the panel meeting that we had in March, we spent a great deal of time of looking at some of the information that was collected, as well as looking for potentially, are there any other locations that we need to make sure we get to. The objective is to look at the root causes of multi-lane roundabout crashes, and really not just exits, it's both entrances and exits. We're really interested in why do we have crashes at multi-lane roundabouts, and in particular it's these annoying PDO crashes. We still, even at multi-lane roundabouts, do not see very many fatal or severe injury crashes at multi-lane roundabouts, which is a great thing. But we also like to minimize the total number of crashes that are happening at multi-lane roundabouts. We're looking at contributing factors that are influencing this. For example, is it a driveway downstream? Is it an education component? Have we not educated our drivers? Is it a signing or a marking issue? Is it vehicle path overlap? We're digging into all of these by collecting data, both field data as well as before and after crash data that we have from many sites across the country. We're also looking at countermeasures to reduce these crashes. That's an important piece, is we want to come out of this not only having collected data, but what potential solutions could we look to in the future that could prevent property damage only crashes at multi-lane roundabouts. What have we tried that is working, and what are the things that maybe we have not tried that could make a difference related to these PDO crashes? And then of course, with any good research project, you would have some sort of suggestions, recommendations, or guidance that would be coming out of this that then could ultimately be shared across the country. And in some cases, folks, it might be something that we haven't done before. So it might be not fully vetted through this research project, but it might give us a clue or some information on where we can head in the future, whether it be design, again, signing, marking, and education, or a combination thereof. And it's very likely that it would be some sort of a combination thereof. So with that, I actually want to introduce Letty Champ from the city of Hilliard, Ohio. She's going to be joining us now. We're also going to have Brian Moore from Arcadis who is going to be joining and talking a little bit about some work that they have been doing there in Hilliard. So Letty, I'm going to let you take it over from here.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. Victoria, can everybody hear me?
Yes, they can all hear you.
Great, thank you. So thanks, Hillary. It's always good to hear everything that you have to say. I just want to kind of touch on a few things that we have going on here in Hilliard that might be of interest to the other folks in the state of Ohio, throughout the state. As Hillary mentioned, we're part of the pooled funds study. City of Hilliard was contributors to that. We really wanted to be at the table to try to come up with some solutions to the 2x2 crash problem that if any of you have heard me speak at OTEC or anything like that, you kind of know I'm pretty passionate about trying to come up with some solutions there. The timing of this was actually really good because the data collection started in 2019. And we made some significant changes to our 2x2 roundabout in the summer of 2019. So the FHWA team was able to collect some data beforehand, both drone video data and counts, and could really see what was going on. Last summer, we made some changes to signing and pavement marking to really clarify and simplify using overhead lane control signs, got rid of fish hooks, changed some key markings in the circulatory roadway, some additional modified signage in our central islands. And so far, knock on wood, we've been pretty pleased with the results. We've been tracking crashes monthly. Before construction, we were averaging 7 crashes per month at this 2x2 roundabout in Main and Cemetery in Hilliard. We even had a couple months where we had 12 crashes in a month. And they were very, very common crash patterns. Since we made these changes, we're averaging 4 crashes a month. So obviously not a slam dunk. We'd like to see it better, but we do see improvement there. One great thing is that in February of 2020, before COVID-19 and all the changes in the traffic, we had 0 crashes at that roundabout. I think that's the first time since we opened it that it's actually had 0, so that's good. Another thing that we have implemented in 2019 as part of that project was putting in raised crosswalks at that roundabout at Main and Cemetery. We had put in raised crosswalks at 2 other roundabouts earlier in the year, and our design was not quite as aggressive. We got pretty aggressive at Main and Cemetery, and we got a ton of complaints initially, but the complaints have very much dropped off. And when you look at the data, they have been very successful in terms of lowering vehicle speeds. What we were trying to do was to get the speeds, the entries and the exits, particularly at our crosswalks, down under 22 miles an hour. And, you know, the key things are on those exit lane roundabouts, or I'm sorry, the exit lane crosswalks. And we were very successful. In fact, I don't think we've ever done any traffic calming type of an activity that has been as successful in terms of lowering vehicle speeds. We dropped our 85th percentile speeds at some of the crosswalks up to 8 miles per hour. So I wouldn't say they were super high to begin with, but this was pretty successful. So even though we got the complaints, because this is in a high ped corridor, we think it's valuable, and we're actually going to be implementing raised crosswalks at the sister roundabout just down from Main and Cemetery, and that's going to happen next year in 2021. So kind of moving forward, in Hilliard, we currently have 14 roundabouts, 2 more that are in design and many more that are in planning or feasibility. But each time we do a new project, we're always trying to figure out how we can do things better. And I think one of the key things that I've learned over the years that I've been doing this is we got to keep them small because we want to keep them slow. And how do we do this? We do it through a lot of different ways. One is vertical measures. I talked a little about the raised crosswalks. Wouldn't put them in at every single roundabout, but I think they're really effective in certain contexts. The other thing is the horizontal geometry, you know, keeping your ICD small, and those other horizontal geometric elements. And then obviously fewer lanes, because if you have fewer lanes, you're gonna have fewer crashes. And so we were starting into the design of a roundabout corridor, and we were working with Arcadis, Brian Moore's project manager, and we were trying to, with the very preliminary stages, really trying to figure out what's our ICD going to be, how small can we make this? And, you know, it always makes you nervous because you know you have a design vehicle and you want to try to accommodate large vehicles. You don't want to have trucks that can't navigate through a roundabout. But we also felt like, boy, we all hear that like those auto turn templates are way too conservative, but how do we know? So we decided we were going to do a little test case. And I know that Brian Moore is a drone operator. So I pitched an idea to him. I said, if I can get in touch with like a manufacturer in Hilliard that has large trucks, how about we see if we can get him to let us drive along in a truck, and you put up a drone, and we can see how that truck navigates in different movements throughout some of our smaller roundabouts that our gut feel is that they're working pretty well, and compare that to those auto turn templates to see how they compare. And this was a great exercise to do. And actually, Brian has prepared some video here. So I'm going to cue over to him and let him talk a little bit about what we did. And it was a great experience. I encourage anyone, especially you public agency folks, go out to the people in your community and ask if you can ride along in a truck, in a semi truck, and it gives you a completely different perspective on your designs. I've been very fortunate. I've done it with truck drivers, and I've done it with our emergency services folks, and been able to ride around in large fire trucks and that sort of thing to see how they maneuver. And I think sometimes we worry maybe a tad too much about those larger vehicles. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but again, you don't need to design a roundabout for like 2 trucks going through simultaneously. It's just, it's because the downfall of doing that is you're going to have a larger roundabout, too many crashes, and it could be too confusing for drivers. So I will, I'm done at this point. I'm going to pass over to Brian and let him show this video and talk through a little bit.
All right, well, thanks, Letty. I guess one thing to add that I thought was interesting in starting this process with Letty is when I first reached out to the trucking company, I was looking for a WB62 because that's a lot of times what we're designing for. And the trucking company was like, well, we don't have any of those. That's not a very common truck. Typically, we're driving a WB67. So I thought that was really interesting that they said that. So they brought out a WB67 truck. So all the videos that you're going to see here are a driver in that WB67 truck. So go ahead and start the video there, Hillary. And I apologize if it is choppy. I think it probably is going to be a little bit through this WebEx video here. But you'll see here is a multi-lane roundabout on the main line, single lane roundabout on the cross streets, ICD of 150 feet, 12-foot truck apron. So here we're going to see a through movement on the inside lane, and the truck's coming in, and you can see he overtracks just a little bit into the outside entry lane, uses a little bit of the truck apron, and then exits through there. So he's using a little bit of a truck apron, and then we're also going to see a through movement the other direction, but this time in the outside lane. And as they come or as the truck comes through, you're going to see it track a little bit on the inside lane. The driver on the inside lane, he kind of holds back. And not once did the truck ever go up on any of the curbs here, with the exception of the truck apron. And especially here on a right turn. Again, this is WB67 going through 150 foot. It's 150 foot on the multi-lane portion of this roundabout. So you can see them making the right turn here. And this is going to go by really quick, but you'll see that this is an auto turn of a WB67, and it showed the truck tracking into the central island, making that left turn. And here's the actual truck. And you can see the truck is only using a portion of the truck apron. So I thought that was just a really interesting observation. Auto turn showed it going into the central island. Here's this same truck doing a U-turn around the roundabout, and again, not going into the central island, even though auto turn truck turns showed that was going to happen. So now we're going to move to another intersection here. This is a single lane that was designed more in a residential area. 120-foot ICD, a 6-foot apron, and the design vehicle here was actually a WB40. So again, this is the same truck. We've been using the WB67 making the right turn. And again, did not go up under the curbs. Here he is making the left turn. And you'll see that he does use the truck apron. He uses the majority of it, but like the other cases, does not get up on the curb, stays in the truck apron. And then here's auto turn showing what a U-turn would look like well into the central island. And then here's our truck that's going to make that same U-turn movement, and just pay attention to how he's using that truck apron. And he'll be using the majority of it, but not getting into the central island. So these were really just some observations that we made last summer. Just thought it was really interesting. I mean, we're designing these roundabouts and really being dictated by the design vehicle, and we're using this the tool of auto turn. And I think it's just I kind of like to be kind of nice to see some additional research, I think, on this and some other locations and how those are tracking. I know I first noticed this, it had been a few years ago, just driving in the winter months, just noticing that there were no truck tires up on the truck aprons. And so I kind of just pay attention to that on a regular basis. And I notice these trucks just don't seem to be using the truck aprons like we thought they would. So that's all I have there. Letty, did you have anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. I think just I think our gut reaction is when we run these auto turn templates, if we had seen that much over tracking, like especially off the truck apron, we would have immediately decided to make the roundabout larger. And I guess I would say we should be questioning some of these assumptions, and maybe as a balancing act, you keep the roundabout smaller, but you increase the truck apron instead. So I guess I would challenge all of us to really think about assumptions and not use a cookie cutter to when you're designing the roundabout. So that's all I had.
I saw there was a question about the speed of the truck. I guess that's something that we didn't measure when we were out there, but if I had to guess, Letty, were you thinking maybe 10 miles an hour? Less, maybe a little less than that?
I would say 10. I mean, it was going, the truck driver was going pretty slowly. I would have to say that this truck driver was a pretty skilled, experienced truck driver. And we all know that not all truck drivers are that good. But I was just so impressed that even on the smaller, the roundabout that was the design vehicle was a WB40, that he didn't even touch any of the curbs. That was pretty impressive. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Letty and Brian, for sharing that great drone footage and really digging deeper into what oftentimes is a very controlling criteria that we use as designers and professionals when it comes to not only roundabouts, but there are other things clearly that we're using auto turn for. And so there are a few questions. I'm going to hold the questions until we get through the rest of this little segment. And then I'll ask both Brian and Letty to join us again when we get to those specific questions as it relates to the trucks and the video that we just saw. So, sit tight just a little bit longer. If there's more questions, please go ahead and add that in there. But I'm going to cover a couple more of the hot topics, and then we'll take another poll and we'll take a pause. So pedestrians is another, so again, go to the other end of the spectrum, is another user that, you know, we really are need to be thinking about. And there's definitely, think back to, I mentioned the ODOT Roundabout Guidance, where it looks at those trade-offs that we need to be thinking about as practitioners. And so this is actually a brand new roundabout. It's actually on a state highway that intersects a local road that connects back up to an interstate. But before this intersection was a signalized intersection, It did have pedestrian traffic, both local as well as I'm going to call it tourists in this area, but not very good at ped accommodations at all, I would say. And when the roundabout project came in, this is a hybrid design. It's 2 lanes in a couple of the directions and a single lane in the other direction. So definitely a hybrid design, more of an elliptical design. The other enhancement here at this location was the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that were added at all 4 legs of the intersection. Actually, there was prohibited pedestrian movements previously, but really opened this area, these 4 quadrants up to have a better flow. It actually also has connectivity to a bike trail and a pathway now that it never had before with this particular project. So I'm going to play, this is also a video. I am going to play it. It's a short, very short clip, but you actually, if you look closely, you do see the pedestrians that are in the splitter island right in front of us in the forefront. But if you actually look past the roundabout, you will actually see that there's pedestrians in the crosswalk on the other side as well. So I'm going to play the video real quickly. Hopefully it won't be too choppy for you. But just want to share with you an example of a significant enhancement at a location that used to be a signalized intersection. They replaced it with the roundabout with constraints in every single quadrant. There's actually a river and a railroad bridge off to the right as well. But they were able to do a really good job in incorporating safe crossings for the pedestrians. So just take a minute here. So again, I'm going to play it again. So remember, watch the far side as well, because you actually see the RFBs on the far side of this intersection as well as in the foreground there. Also notice that the pedestrians, as they go from one side to the other, they actually do have to hit that the push button to go to kind of that 2-stage crossing. But very visible, clearly low light here, kind of a cloudy day, but you can actually see the RFBs going on both sides of the roundabout. So really, really good in terms of visibility, and those pedestrians were able to navigate that intersection very nicely. So I've got a poll question that actually is going to tie back to pedestrians in just a moment. But before I do that, I'm just going to cover a couple more topics, what I'm calling, I guess, hot topics here in terms of some questions that typically are coming up. All right, let's get to that poll question. So I'm actually going to launch a poll question here. This will be the second one you're going to see. So again, the question being, are you comfortable with discussing pedestrian safety at roundabouts? Yes, no, sort of, I don't know. So this would be at a public meeting if someone asks you a question, you know, and it could be general safety, it could be accessibility as it relates to pedestrians crossing at roundabout. So it looks like about half of you have said that yes, you are comfortable with talking and discussing pedestrian safety at roundabouts. 6% of you are saying no, I'm not really comfortable, and 36% are saying no, and then 9% saying I'm not sure, so, or I don't know. So that is a good mix, I would say, from what we're seeing. I'm glad that a majority, we do have a lot of people on this webinar today, that a majority of you are comfortable. That's great. And I would like to hear from you, and again, we'll get to some more Q&A in a moment. Where are you struggling with this? Where are you having a hard time maybe stating the facts or tying it to a specific location? Would love to hear from you so we can have some of that as part of our discussion. You heard Letty talk about some of the modifications that they've been making at their roundabouts related to the raised crosswalks. I'm a big fan of seeing raised crosswalks out there. And I do think that there's definitely benefits for the pedestrian as well as the driver when we start to look at some of these adaptations, whether it be an RFB a raised crosswalk, a pedestrian hybrid beacon, and really getting actually back to the whole geometry and the size of your intersection as well. All right, so we'll start populating the questions there so we can address some of those as we continue forward. So one of the topics that someone had asked me to speak briefly about is connected and autonomous vehicles. So this is an area that clearly is emerging overall in our country. And the specific question was how it ties to roundabouts. So although at TRB, the Transportation Research Board annual meeting this year, there were at least 2, maybe 3 papers, if I'm not mistaken, that were specific to roundabouts and connected and autonomous vehicles. I encourage you to look for those papers that were presented again at the 2020 TRB annual meeting and dig deeper into those. But I just wanted to, again, just touch on that. And when you talk about connected and autonomous vehicles, you have to think about, it can mean a lot depending on who you're talking about and what their relative knowledge is of the topic. And again, I, by no stretch of the imagination, am a specialist in this area when it comes to connected and autonomous vehicles. But I did pull the link there on the bottom is from Federal Highways, from our operations group that is diving into this deeper. But we need to think about connected drivers. We need to think about connected vehicles. We need to think about automated vehicles and autonomous vehicles, because those are all actually very different pieces of this conversation. And we also need to be thinking about how all of this can be connected or even not connected, depending on where we are from an infrastructure standpoint, from when it comes to connected drivers, in terms of you actually having some sort of a device that can share information with other people around you, with other drivers or pedestrians around you. And so I really just wanted to mention this. To my knowledge, we do not have a research project that's specific to roundabouts. I know it does get discussed at our committee meetings in terms of people kind of tracking where this topic is and how it relates to roundabouts. You know, and I think that the pieces of this puzzle are yet to come. But you can see there on the bottom right, connected and automated vehicle applications, clearly looking at efficiency in traffic, looking at safety when it comes to the interaction of users, both vehicle, pedestrian, vehicle, bicyclists, and really sorting all of that out. And so I encourage you to keep your ears open as this advances. We clearly have pockets across the country where there's pilots that are going on. And we do need to be aware. We do need to think about how this might affect us at roundabouts. But for right now, I think just educating yourself generally can be helpful in conversations that may come up. And we will continue to talk about this again at our TRB roundabout meeting. So if you know someone that is on those committees, and there's several people in Ohio that do sit on the TRB committee, I encourage you to, if you've got specific questions, to let them know, let me know, and we can bring that to our group and talk a little bit more about it. But again, there is not any real active specific there. I mentioned that there were a couple of papers written that I encourage you to find access to those through TRB annual meeting site. And then the last topic that I want to cover here, just as hot topics, is the safe system approach. So the safe system approach is something that has been active internationally, the Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, where really it's a approach to what we do to provide a safe network. Really, its core principles are looking and knowing that death and serious injury are unacceptable, no matter who we are or what agency we are, that those fatal crashes, those deaths and serious injuries are unacceptable. We also have to acknowledge that humans make mistakes. And there are ways that we can use infrastructure to help correct some of the mistakes that people make. And it's working in combination with the human factors part, the education, the enforcement, the engineering. We all have to be working together if we really are going to have a safe system. We have to acknowledge the fact that humans are vulnerable, and there's a limit to the amount of energy that we can withstand, whether that's being in a car crash and whether you're belted or unbelted, a pedestrian or bicyclist that perhaps is hit by a vehicle. We can only take so much before pure physics is not going to be on our side if speeds are high. The responsibility is shared across everyone. Redundancy is crucial in the system, and we need to be proactive, not reactive. So the safe system approach is again an area. ITE has a committee related to it. Federal Highways, we have been very actively involved with the safe system approach. We actually have an ongoing project right now related to safe system approach. Mark Doctor from my team is also sitting on an international group talking about safe system. ITE, the May ITE journal did also have a dedicated articles related to safe system. I really encourage you to pull up that May 2020 ITE journal and take a look at that article, the articles and information that is in there. This is emerging, and I'm happy to say that roundabouts fit very, very nicely with the safe system approach. Just think about it. We already know that roundabouts can reduce fatal and serious crashes. We already know that that roundabouts reduce the probability of a crash because we have reduced those conflict points. We know that speeds are slow in roundabouts. So in terms of our vulnerability as humans, that is lessened when we have a roundabout that has those slow speeds. We also, you know, again, roundabouts can be very proactive. So it is an example that is used internationally as a strategy, as a countermeasure that can make a big difference. And we know that our partners at National Safety Council talk about doubling down on what works. And we know roundabouts do work, and that is definitely part of the solution of the safe system approach that I know that you'll be hearing more and more about. So we're going to pause here. Victoria, let's take one question here, and then I'll finish out the slides, and then we will actually take questions at the end. So if there's a question that you maybe want to, if you had a chance to look at questions, maybe one more for Letty and Brian before I move on to the last few slides.
Sure, I'll get back up to those. They wanted to know if there was any communication with AutoTurn concerning the information that been found out through the video that was made. There were quite a few comments about had the software been updated to reflect this new information. So maybe they could address that.
Yeah, I guess as far as Transoft goes, the maker of AutoTurn, no, we have not had any conversations. Really, this group here is the first to kind of see this video pulled together. So I definitely would like to have that conversation with them here in the near future, but as of now, those conversations haven't taken place.
And just a quick follow-up, there was a request from a number of people about the possibility of sharing that video. So maybe if you guys could put threads together and decide if it could be shared more widely.
Yeah, we can definitely get that out.
All right, thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Brian. And so we'll get back to some more of those questions at the end. But I just want to round out this conversation about education and how important it is to always be educating in what we do, and whether that's the public or whether that's internally within our own agencies or in our own companies. It's really important to be not only sharing what we're doing, but also encouraging each other to think outside of the box when it comes to education. So I am premiering a new public service announcement that Federal Highways has just, we've just actually gotten approval for it. So I don't think it's officially on our website yet. So this is audio only. So it's a PSA, it could go on the radio, it could go anywhere, you could share it, but it is just audio. There is no visual component to this. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this. I hope it's loud and clear So Victoria, let me know if it is not. So get ready for our Roundabout public service announcement debut.
Are you ready, kids? Go round and round, round and round. Is everyone okay?
Traditional intersections can be dangerous, but roundabouts are a safer alternative.
Really?
Roundabouts are safer for driving, walking, and bicycling. They actually improve traffic flow and reduce severe crashes by 80%.
80%?
Roundabouts save lives.
Instead of people on the street, go roundabout, roundabout, round.
All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that new roundabout PSA that we've created at Federal Highway Administration. Thanks to Jeff Shaw for letting us debut that here today. Very excited about that. If you are interested in getting that downloadable file, please let me know. I think even though we don't have it posted, we again, we have approval, we can start sharing that. So if you want to speak to your, whether it's your local agency maybe has a TV station or a radio station, or you have someone you want to share it with in your community, please let me know and we'll make sure that we can get a file to you. There is actually also another one that we have related to intersections. So there's actually two that were done together there. So excited to release that to this group today. Again, you guys are always so innovative. One other brand new thing that we have is our Federal Highway Safety Virtual Trade Show. So clearly with the environment that we're in right now, a lot of us aren't seeing each other face to face. We're not going to conferences and trainings like we were. So Tara McLaughlin at our Federal Highways Office of Safety has done an amazing job of creating this virtual trade show. And how it relates to roundabouts is, I hope you guys can see there, is we have this very large roundabout that people can walk through in our trade show. If you've been at ITE or National Association of County Engineers or Transportation Research Board meetings. And I'm really excited to let you guys know that in addition to everything else that is available, this is a PDF that I could share with Victoria and she could share with the group, is that we actually also have created a downloadable file that you guys can actually get this plotted or printed, and you all can be using it at your public meetings or even just as an education piece at Engineering Week or something to that effect. So again, on our website, this is live on our website. You can get a JPEG or a PDF. You can plot it to scale. Again, it's meant to be walked through put on the floor. And I know that there are other folks out there that already have something like this that they've used maybe in public meetings or have some sort of a scaled drawing, but we wanted to make this more readily available to people. And so that was actually just also approved. And again, thanks to Tara from the Office of Safety for getting that approved and making that available for other folks to be utilizing that. The other thing I'm going to just mention is there was an article on the 2019 National Roundabouts Week. I was with you all during National Roundabouts Week last September. Again, there was an amazing response to that, and many of you that I know that are on this webinar today contributed to that. I appreciate that. It was great to see all the wonderful things that were posted on that hashtag Roundabouts Week. And so just wanted to share that there was an article in case you didn't see it. You'll notice that Professor Roundabout was acknowledged in that article. And I think that's really important, again, in terms of the contributions that many of you in the state of Ohio made to that the Roundabouts Week. And I look forward to the next one that's coming. So again, always a pleasure to be with you all at your statewide conference. Great host there from Newark last year. I just wanted to make sure that you all know that many of those, if not all of the presentations, are available through Ohio DOT and Ohio LTAP. There's also a nice news clip that came out of that was in the loop. So, and I look forward, and I know, Victoria, this would be a great time for you actually maybe to mention what the plans are for the 2020 Ohio Roundabout Conference.
Absolutely. I am not gonna give up the ship here, as they say. We are going to take the conference virtual, which means we're not going to do it all in one day. We're probably going to spread it out throughout National Roundabouts Week, but it's definitely going to give us the opportunity to celebrate all week long. And I'm looking forward to getting the details out to everybody. I'm just putting the finishing touches on how we have reconfigured things so we can get the call for presenters out as well. And we're really excited that, you know, we'll be able to hopefully engage others who might not have had the travel dollars to come into Ohio for the conference. So hopefully we can get a lot of engagement, not only within Ohio, but from without as well.
Great, really looking forward to that. I know I already have it in my calendar for September, so really looking forward to joining you all virtually again come National Roundabouts Week. So, and Letty, you're gonna get another shout out here. If you didn't have a chance to see Professor Roundabout, again, it got a lot of attention. And in fact, Letty ended up in the London Times. There's a news article and actually features some of the things that Letty has been doing. So kudos to you, Letty, for expanding your education, being creative, and being an inspiration for how you are working on your problem children, as you have called them in the past, and how you are looking for solutions despite some of the setbacks that have occurred. I'm really glad to hear some of the successes that you've been having there in Hilliard, and not to mention the fact that you've had a lot of different successes in Hilliard. I know you've brought attention to some of the issues that have been had, but you are definitely the due diligence that you have not only for your community, but the contributions that you've been able to make for not only Ohio, but really nationally. We really appreciate your willingness to share. Speaking of sharing, Carmel, Indiana has always been a special place still, I would say. Roundabout City, USA, with the number of roundabouts that are in Carmel, Indiana. They have had, they've got some videos out there, Roundabout Rookie that they have. They've done this before. They did it again last year. So again, I'm going to encourage you here in a moment just to share some of the ideas that you have either created your own or you are aware of. So National Roundabouts Week will be September 21st to the 25th. Same hashtag Roundabouts Week. I'm sharing there actually a cake from Vail, Colorado. Vail, Colorado actually created a proclamation during National Roundabouts Week last year. They have a really actually very detailed cake you can see there that did not disappoint. It literally looks like that if you've ever been at the Vail Roundabout. One of our first roundabouts really in the country, built in the early 1990s, and really proud to see that Vail is still excited about what they have done in their community, as well as looking for other opportunities for roundabouts as they look at other improvements. So this is not going to be a poll, but this is where I want you guys to put some of the comments in. Please share any new roundabout education materials you've been working on. So if you've got a link or you have a PDF that you can make us aware of, I can work with Victoria and we can make sure that we are sharing continuously. We don't have to wait for National Roundabouts Week in September to be sharing with each other. Part of us all advancing is being able to communicate on a regular basis in terms of some of the new and exciting ways that we are both educating internally, maybe from a technical perspective, but also from the public perspective, from leadership and decision makers to help us all advance roundabouts as best as we can. So again, please be populating that the question pod so we can make sure that we can share what you have been working on with others. I encourage you again to mark your calendars for National Roundabouts Week in September, where we will also, sounds like, be meeting together for your Ohio Roundabout Conference. So with that, we are ready. I know we just have a couple minutes left, but Victoria, if there's any questions that you want us to cover as we close out here, please let us know.
Sure, and I've got at the end of the webinar, if we don't get to everyone's questions, and obviously we won't because there's a bunch of them in here, I will be giving the spreadsheet with all your questions to the presenters so they can follow up with you as well. But there is one about Letty and her design guidance in Hilliard. What is she using for her design guidance with the raised crosswalks? And there was a follow-up question that they also wanted to know, how do the raised crosswalks affect plowing? Have she heard anything from her local plow drivers?
So I'll start with the second question first. As all of you know, in Ohio, we had a very mild winter. So I don't think our snowplow drivers, they were probably only out once and it was pretty minimal. At that particular intersection, they actually salt the crap out of it to begin with because they don't want to have to do a ton of plowing. So they hit it ahead of time with brine and then they salt it. And so the plowing is kept to a minimum, but I actually can't give you much firsthand information. I suspect they probably do not love them because it's going to require them to pay a lot closer attention to where their plow blade is with respect to those raised crosswalks. I would not be surprised if we have a really bad winter that we might have to do a little bit of maintenance on those. But I think about the other 350 days of the year or more that they are a huge benefit. I'll take that any day. Regarding design guidance, what I think I mentioned that this is actually the third roundabout that we did raised crosswalks on. The first two that we did, we used a City of Columbus guidance for a raised intersection or a speed hump kind of tailored. Because those did not provide the speed control that we wanted, we basically, and I was given an order from our mayor at the time, you need to make those more aggressive. So we used Letty's design guidance. We worked with our design team and we basically shortened up our rise and run on the front end of the roundabout going in. We had a 3-foot run and a 3-inch rise, so pretty aggressive. We had an 8-foot top that was flat. And then we went down those 3 inches over 6 feet on the back end. And I think they work pretty well. The challenge here is when you have to do a retrofit, you got to make sure that they're ADA compliant. And that was the biggest challenge, was making sure that the pathway as the pedestrians go over wasn't greater than 5%. So it was a lot of work, but I think it was worthwhile.
Thanks, Letty. And we've never had anybody complain about running over on one of these roundabout webinars, but if you need to go, we are at 3:30. I just did want to bring in, though, there's been quite a few questions about how individuals who are visually impaired are able to traverse roundabouts, and what resources are out there to be able to reassure folks, even at public meetings, that visually impaired individuals can traverse roundabouts. So, Hillary, did you want to take that?
Sure. And you have a wonderful person in the state of Ohio. Patricia Kovacs is attended roundabout trainings. She usually comes to the Ohio Roundabout Conference and has been very helpful in understanding the importance of blind and impaired pedestrians, visually impaired pedestrians, and is actually taking the time. I actually, after 2 years ago when I was there for the Roundabout Conference, I actually took extra time and met with one of Patricia's friends who was born blind. She did have a seeing eye dog, and we went out to one of the roundabouts that had rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And man, I learned, even though I can read and I can study up on every research project that's ever been done with accessibility related to roundabouts, being out there with Patricia and her friend and her four-legged companion was very, very important to me in terms of what I was able to take away. So again, Patricia has been very active, not only in the Columbus area, but in Ohio overall. And I know that perhaps we can get her to maybe speak to us at the September conference coming up. In terms of the documentation and the resources that are out there, NCHRP, I'm going to make sure I get it, 674 is the research from basically around the early 2000s. That has some information on raised crosswalks, as well as pedestrian hybrid beacons. The more up-to-date research that's out there, Federal Highways had done some research on rectangular rapid flashing beacons and multi-lane roundabouts related to accessibility. That is available on Federal Highways website, our intersections under roundabouts, excuse me, you'll see that. And then we have NCHRP 834, and there's a companion document, a web-only document that goes with that as well, that looks at other, again, adaptations at multi-lane roundabouts where it comes to looking at accessibility and safety. Again, I featured the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. We've got the pedestrian hybrid beacon, the raised crosswalks. Those have all been part of the conversation for the last 10 years. If you've ever sat in one of the Transportation Research Board meetings, we do talk about that. The U.S. Access Board oftentimes attends those meetings to share what's going on related to PROAG. I know Victoria mentioned PROAG at the upfront. So again, those are some of the documents that you might want to take a look at. But again, typically what we're seeing is good documentation, communication within your community for those folks that are blind or sight impaired, or advocates in your area that might be able to contribute information and contributions about your project, I think is the best way to go as it relates to accessibility.
Great, thank you. I am, like I mentioned earlier, going to download all of these questions and provide them over to our presenters and our speakers today. But I want to thank everyone for being on the webinar, and thank you, Hillary, for taking time to do this in your very busy schedule. We're very passionate about roundabouts here in Ohio, and maybe even though Carmel's got the Roundabout City title, we can be known as the Roundabout State. We'll have to work towards that here in Ohio. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Yep. And
Bye.
we'll go ahead and sign off now, and your certificate will be coming via email, hopefully by the end of the week, for your CPDs. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.